All right, this video is for the solving right triangles notes. This is going to be lesson 5.9. So we're going to solve for the missing side length and for a missing angle measure in right triangles. So we've got 4 problems here. So first one, solve for x and y. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so let's look at x. X is going to be this side. Okay, so the information that I have this angle, and then this is always going to be the hypotenuse. But in reference to this angle, side x is an opposite, and then this is an angle measure. Okay, so if I have opposite and hypotenuse, remember our little mnemonic, so, ka, toa. So I have O and H, that means I'm going to use sine. Okay, so the sine of the angle that we have is going to be equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. Okay, if I'm solving this by hand, to get x by itself, I multiply both sides by 25.6. And that would solve for x. Okay, that's your safest bet. I'm just not sure if menu 3.1 is going to work all the time. We're going to go ahead and try it with these. But being able to set it up by hand saves you the hassle of worrying if it's set up right. And we're rounding to the tenth, so this one is 16.8. And then I'm going to go ahead and try this in menu 3.1. So I'm going to do menu 3.1. Sine of 41 equals x over 25.6, and then comma x, and I get the same thing. Okay, I've never used menu 3.1 for that. That's why I'm more comfortable doing it by hand, because they're not real complex problems here. All right, so angle or side y here is an adjacent side, so I don't want to use this piece, especially since we rounded. But with just what I have an angle, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So I can use cosine. So I can do cosine of 41 degrees equals the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. And we'd solve the same way. We'd just multiply both sides by the 25.6. And that will give us the value of y. So I want you to see something here in your calculator. All right, 25.6, and then if we do cosine, see how those parentheses pop up? You need those parentheses around the angle measure, so make sure that you have those there. Otherwise, it may not calculate it right. So this one would round to 19.3. So I can find, if I've got enough pieces, I can find the missing sides of these triangles. Okay, it's just what pieces you have. So in this one, no matter what, x is going to be a hypotenuse. And then the other 2 pieces of information I have the angle, and then in reference to this angle, this side here would be an opposite. So this would be a sine problem. So I could do sine of 38 is going to equal the opposite side over the hypotenuse. All right, in a situation like this one, so if you notice the difference, here we had the variable on top of the fraction, here it's on the bottom. So this one, what's going to happen is these 2 things switch places when we solve. So it would be 26.5 over the sine of 38. The long explanation of what happens. I would multiply both sides by x, okay? So I would have x times sine of 38 equals 26.5, but I need the x by itself, so I would divide both sides by the sine of 38, and that's how I'm left with this. Okay, so in the calculator, and again, it's a lot less buttons to push if you can get it to here instead of doing the menu 3.1. We're going to try it again just to see. So we get about 43.0 would be the length of the hypotenuse. So again, let's try menu 3-1. Let's see what happens. So sine of 38 equals x, 26.5 over x, comma x. And it did work for that one. All right, angle y is an adjacent side. Okay, and again, I don't want to use that value I just found. So I have opposite and adjacent. So for this one, I'm going to use tangent. So I have tangent of 38, and opposite goes on top, adjacent, which is y, goes on bottom. So again, this one kind of switches a little bit differently. Okay. So we would have 26.5 over the tangent of 38, and we get 33.9. So a way that you can always check these is to look at the hypotenuse. Okay, this side should always be the bigger side. So in this triangle here, 25.6 is bigger than the other two sides. And this one here, this is the hypotenuse, and it's bigger than the other two sides. So it's just a little check. Remember, the hypotenuse should always be the longest side. All right, so finding missing angle measures. Okay, this one switches, so you have to be careful. If I want to find x, in reference to angle x, this is an opposite, this is an adjacent. So the tangent of x is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. And when we have this, we can just do inverse, right? Inverse of tangent, and we can do 18 over 27. Let me scoot that over. Okay, so inverse of tangent, and then 18 over 27. Again, we're rounding to the 10th, so about 33.7 degrees. Now, if I want to do angle y, this is no longer the adjacent, this is no longer the opposite. In reference to angle y, 27 is now the opposite, 18 is now the adjacent. So things switch. So the tangent of y would be 27 over 18. So you have to be really careful. You have to think about what angle you're talking about and what the relation to that angle, or the relation of the sides to that angle. Okay, so 27 over 18 gives me 56.3 degrees. So the check with these, I can add the angles. So this angle plus this angle, plus the 90-degree angle should give me 180. Okay, or since we're dealing with a right triangle, these two angles should add up to 90. So you do have a check in these as well. Okay, this last one here, this side's always going to be the hypotenuse. But if we're looking for x in reference to x, this side is an adjacent. So we have adjacent and hypotenuse. That's cosine. So the cosine of x is going to equal adjacent over hypotenuse. So we can use the inverse. Inverse. All right. And we get about 44.7 degrees. When it comes to angle y, though, this is no longer the adjacent. This is the opposite side. So if we have opposite and hypotenuse, we're doing sine. So the sine of angle y, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So we could do the inverse of sine, over 76. Gives me 45.3 degrees. Again, if I do my check, I get the 90. Those two should add up to 90. So that's it for this set of notes.